The ruler of Mandalore must possess the dark saber.
Then she shall have it.
In case that scene didn't make it obvious enough that this was now the Bo show, later on they had another scene where they literally passed her the torch. Yup, and we weren't the only ones laughing at this nonsense. Hello and welcome to HateWatchers. Today we're going over the 4 major tricks that Season 3 of The Mandalorian tried to pull on us. In case you're new to the channel, we have a video series called How They Tried to Trick Us, which is exactly what it sounds like, an analysis of how different shows and movies tried to trick viewers. The goals of these tricks vary greatly, from trying to get people to tune into the show or movie, all the way to trying to manufacture artificial buzz around their product. But all of the different tricks employed have one thing in common: a lack of respect for you, the viewer, or in other words, the customer. And as such, we think it's only fair to call these tricks out for what they really are, because the people producing these shows and movies don't want customers, they want consumers. Mindless, non-critical consumers who will tune in without failure as long as the product is wrapped in the right corporate packaging. And Season 3 was a great example of the type of crappy product the soulless corporations want you to silently swallow, capitalizing on one of the biggest brands of all time with a massive built-in audience. But rather than simply continuing in the footsteps of Season 1 and 2 and making a good product, Disney and LucasFilm opted to try and trick its customers instead, hoping that people would tune in and stick around. Now, this isn't just another review video where we get out the old bat to beat the same dead horse everyone else has taken a whack at. We're specifically here to talk about the tricks employed by Disney and Lucasfilm to get people watching their crap. So we're not here to talk about every problem with the show. So for Season 3, that means we're not going to be focusing on nonsensical action sequences, disjointed writing and storylines, the darksaber being stupid prophecy, the darksaber being destroyed, character regression, the horrific pacing of the season, no clear story direction for 6 episodes, alluding to shitty storylines from the sequel trilogy, Gideon's disappearing jetpack, Disney's rather tame and lame approach to Mandalorians, Lizzo, the other cameos, Mando's adoption of Grogu having no emotional weight because it was all but the case already, no mention of Paz Vizsla after his sacrifice really not being necessary, the forced inclusion of the Praetorian Guards, the Praetorian Guards being hapless, Grogu's puppet being too puppety, spending 45 minutes on this loser, and Moff Gideon only playing the hide part of hide and seek with Mando while his prized secret weapon was destroyed, despite being able to track Mando's movements. Whew, my lord, this season was shitty. Of course, we always give every show or movie its fair shake, so we carve out an albeit small portion of the video to go over what the show or movie did right. For Season 3 of The Mandalorian, that would be the great ship battles, some decent action, the monsters look good even if their inclusion was questionable, and Mandalore had a cool, unique aesthetic. And most of the show's costuming and effects would make the list as well. Now, without further ado, let's get into the list of tricks we're here to discuss. Kicking things off, we have the first entry on our list of tricks The Mandalorian tried to pull on us, which is Season 3's misleading story beats. We already know that Season 3's story was all over the place, taking 6 full episodes to finally settle on something resembling a main storyline. But as meandering and underwhelming as that was, the misleading story beats still stood out like sore thumbs and contributed to the overall crap fest that was this season's writing. A terrific example of one of these story beats that went nowhere or had almost no payoff was the Mythosaur. Introduced way back in Episode 2 with an unexpected Mythosaur sighting, this creature of legend's potential to upend the power balance amongst the Mandalorians was obvious. For a group of people who mostly yielded rule to whoever so happened to possess this piece of Disney merchandise at any given time, the existence of the beast whose very symbol they all adopted, and had long thought were extinct, presented an opportunity for another path for someone to take power. Taming the beast would have brought anyone instant respect and loyalty among their fellow Mandalorians, and from a writing perspective, they could finally get away from the nonsensical darksaber prophecy that at one point meant this thing was the ruler of Mandalore for at least a couple of hours. But nope. After appearing in the 2nd episode, the Mythosaur played no part in the season's story, outside of being the subject of 2 awkward conversations between Bo and the Armorer, and having the 3rd worst cameo of the season in the finale episode. We should say though that sitting out most of this crappy season was probably the right career move for the Mythosaur. Then we had Baby Yoda's flashback to his escape from Order 66. We got a taste of Grogu's backstory when his first flashback was crammed into the middle of Boba Fett's show. And Season 3 of The Mandalorian added a tiny bit more to that flashback, showing the no-name who rescued him and how they escaped the Jedi Temple. Okay, that's an alright start. Now we know the first 10 minutes of Grogu's journey. Great. Only about 27 years, 364 days, 23 hours, and 50 minutes of Grogu's life left to account for, to explain how he went from the Jedi Order into the hands of some random pirates, or how he evaded the Empire for almost 3 decades despite being a toddler. Suffice it to say, there are a few gaps left to fill in, and you'd think with 4 episodes left in the season at this point, maybe we'd revisit this storyline and find out a little bit more about why this character isn't just here for merchandising. But apparently when Lizzo rolls onto the set, there's no room left to continue these kinds of storylines. The creators couldn't even help themselves from throwing misleading story beats into the episode titles. The penultimate episode was titled The Spies, alluding to multiple people of questionable loyalty among the Imperials, the Republic, and the Mandalorians. One spy outed they themselves in the first scene of episode 7, but no other spies popped up in the rest of the episode. Of course, that means that the final episode would reveal who the other spy was. But just like the creators failed to string together a coherent story, they also failed to use basic grammar when titling these episodes, and the pluralization of the word spies was just another dead end. Some of the misleading story beats even go back to last season, like the Darksaber. After Din won the Darksaber from Gideon at the end of Season 2, obvious tension was built between Din and Bo Katan, who needed the Darksaber if she was to rule Mandalore. That set the stage for at least some kind of conflict between Din and Bo in Season 3, as the stupid rules about the Darksaber say it can't just be handed over. But other than one passive-aggressive conversation, Season 3 didn't really have any conflict between Din and Bo. And the Darksaber? Handed off to Bo like a ham sandwich on a super lame technicality. And just like the turd that was Season 3, another storyline was flushed down the drain. And the more you dig, more and more little instances of this same problem keep popping up. Carson Teva's whole big discovery of Beskar being present at the site of Gideon's jailbreak was forgotten just as quick as it came up. The missing portion of the Mandalorian fleet shed between Navarro and Mandalore was a nothing burger. Even Din getting captured by his evil nemesis, Moff Gideon, was over 30 seconds later. Oh, and Gideon has somehow made a batch of custom Force-sensitive clones he's going to use to... Oh, never mind. They're dead. For Season 3, they had more storylines that were dead ends, misdirections, or big nothings than they had real ones. Now, it's easy to chalk these all up to shitty writing and creators who don't care enough about what they're making to pay attention. However, not all of these instances can be attributed to lazy creatives. In fact, some of these can be attributed to insidious creatives who would rather trick and manipulate viewers than simply put out a good product, something they're clearly not capable of doing. The goal of alluding to or developing these storylines that ultimately go nowhere is to convince you, the viewer, to keep tuning in every week. They hope you'll get invested in where those storylines may go as you speculate on what's coming next and hear all the different fan theories and predictions after each episode. So, did it work? Was Season 3 able to keep people hooked and maintain steady viewership week after week? Based on the Nielsen ratings, Season 3 bled viewers most every week. There were a couple random small upticks during the season, but for the most part the show lost viewers each week. And while that trend may be typical for some shows, it's the opposite of the trend from the second season of The Mandalorian, which added viewers pretty steadily week after week. So based on all this, we can confidently say that this trick failed in its bid to keep viewers tuning in for each new episode. If this trick worked on you and kept you watching until the end of the season, you might have noticed a sudden jump in quality for the last 2 episodes. And that brings us to our next trick. The second trick that The Mandalorian tried to pull on us was focusing on finishing the season strong. Now, the final 2 episodes weren't great by any metric, but compared to the shit show that was the preceding 6 episodes, episodes 7 and 8 were certainly good by comparison. In those last 2 episodes, suddenly we had a clear, coherent story and we're making progress towards something. Suddenly we had a unified group of Mandalorians. Suddenly we were bringing some of the focus back to Mando and Baby Yoda. Suddenly we had villains for our protagonists to work against. But upping the quality wasn't the only step taken to try and finish the season on a high note. They also went out of their way to introduce us to the major players in the Imperial Remnant, likely showing us the next big bads our heroes will be taking on in Season 4 and in other shows and movies. They brought in Hux to tie in the First Order, they name-dropped Grand Admiral Thrawn, and they even threw in Captain Pellaeon to appeal to Star Wars Legends fans. They wanted to make it clear to viewers that this is all part of a larger plan, that the end of this season was not the end of this story. And of course, they waited until the end of the season to do so. By alluding to a larger story in the works and tightening up this season's story in the final episodes, the creators wanted to go out with a bang. Now, they went out with more of a whimper than a bang, but there was still a very tangible improvement over the rest of the season. Now, the goals with this trick are twofold: to try and save the show's ratings with a last-minute boost, and to get you to tune in next season. Now, did this trick work? Well, on the latter metric, we won't know until Season 4 releases, but outside of pulling an even more brazen, down-low, dirty trick,
Somehow Palpatine returned.
it's hard to imagine anything but a significant drop in viewership for The Mandalorian Season 4. As for the former goal, trying to boost the show's ratings, they were actually successful with this one. After the finale episode, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes jumped 4 points to just get to 50%. So even though the final scores are nothing to be proud of, and the boost wasn't that significant, they were moderately successful in extorting a higher rating out of viewers. Of course, a 50% rating, while deserved, is pretty rough for a show that had scored consistently high audience ratings in previous seasons. But what do you expect when you pull the rug out from under viewers 3 seasons into a show? Which brings us to our third trick on the list, the most egregious, devious trick the creators tried to pull on viewers. And of course, that was the sudden, fundamental character focus shift away from Din and Grogu and onto Bo Katan. Must I remind everyone that this is the Mandalorian and not the Womandalorian? But in all seriousness, the sheer audacity to make Din and Grogu side characters in their own show in the 3rd season is almost impressive. Before this season, we spent 16 episodes with Mando and Baby Yoda and never once had to question whose show this was. Viewers made it clear with their time and their money that they wanted to see more of Mando and his adventures with his little green friend. And so we, like idiots apparently, expected that Season 3 would be more of what fans told Disney they liked. But unnamed executive at Lucasfilm and Disney had other plans in mind. Enter Strong Woman. Hey kids, do you like The Mandalorian and following the space adventures of Mando? Then you'll love our new product, Mando with boobs. The premiere episode of Season 3 showed no real signs that the show had been hijacked by this interloper, but episodes 2 through 7 made it clear that this was now the Bo show. Din and Grogu were little more than window dressing while Bo was literally handed everything she needed, like the Darksaber, the torch, special privileges by the armorer, even the key to Lizzo's enlarged heart. And when it finally did come time for conflict, she was sending a grown man flying backward 10 feet with a tap on the shoulder. And that's probably the worst part of this sudden shift to Bo Katan. She's not that interesting or likable. If you want to shift the show slowly toward following another character, okay. But you have to take your time, and that other character has to be worth watching. And Lucasfilm and Disney didn't meet either of those criteria. Bo's main qualification for ruling Mandalore is that her sister was ruler once. And Bo got her shot at ruling Mandalore before and was a miserable failure. So much so that Mandalore was assumed to be cursed. But Bo is just a flat character with no arc to speak of. She is singularly focused on ruling Mandalore, never has her beliefs questioned, goes through no real moral dilemmas, and faces no real hardship on her way to power. It's not interesting. Bo is a fine side character who can bring a little intrigue into the mix, but she's not main character material. But all of Bo's shortcomings as a character are secondary to the abhorrent decision of making her story the main focus of this season. Fans didn't sign up for this. Fans didn't pay for this. All of the fans' loyalty was paid back by taking what they liked about the show and pushing it way into the background while we had to watch Bo fail her way up the ladder. Hey, that sounds like a familiar career path. It was an egregious bait and switch and just goes to show you how little Disney and Lucasfilm think of their customers. So it's no surprise that the 3 best episodes of the season, episodes 1, 7, and 8, were the ones that had more of a focus on Din and Grogu. Maybe the real trick was trying to get fans to like Mando and Baby Yoda even more by showing us how bad other characters can be. But what's the point? What are they trying to achieve by sidelining the protagonists of the previous 2 seasons in favor of some other character? Well, the creator's main goal here is to push a different character on a captive fan base, giving them an outlet to tell the story they want to tell to an audience that never signed up for that story. It's a form of creators hijacking an established brand and using it to push stories and narratives they want to show, in lieu of what viewers want to see. Lucasfilm and Disney did the same thing with Reva in the Kenobi show, and to an extent with Mando and Boba Fett's show, so it's par for the course at this point. I can't wait to see the Ahsoka show spend 6 episodes on Chewbacca. Oh, that's right. Dave Filoni's perverse obsession with Ahsoka won't allow that to happen. Anyway, was this trick successful? Well, we can surmise that if the trick worked and fans were liking the story they were seeing, that would show up in sustained viewership numbers as well as high audience scores. And by both of these metrics, we're happy to say that this underhanded trick did not work. Fans were tuning out pretty rapidly as viewership numbers quickly fell below those of Season 2. And the audience ratings for the show are pretty abysmal at just 50%. So we can say definitively that this trick failed. It's still pretty astounding to think about. It's like watching Breaking Bad, and in the 3rd season we suddenly shift to following some car wash employee for half the season. And that car wash employee becomes the drug kingpin in the meantime because Walter White handed him the keys to the RV. Now maybe fans would have been more accepting of this sudden character shift if they had any idea at all that it was coming. And that takes us to our 4th and final trick on the list. Last up, we have to talk about how this season was marketed. Revisiting the trailers for Season 3, they paint a very different picture of this season than what we got. The main trailer implies this season would be about Din teaching Grogu how to be a Mandalorian, something that came up in about 2 scenes total over the course of the season. There's also an allusion to a greater threat facing the galaxy, but in the actual show, this didn't come up until the second to last episode. But the most damning thing about the trailers is their portrayal of Bo Katan. Or should we say their lack of Bo Katan. She appears in just 8 seconds of the initial teaser trailer and did not appear in the official trailer before the premiere. They even made sure to crop her out of scenes where she was standing right next to Mando so she wouldn't be in the trailer. That's simply horseshit. Someone who is the focus of 60% of this season not even appearing in the official trailer? That's false advertising. And the posters and marketing images Disney put out before the season began perpetuated the idea that this would be another season of Mando and Grogu doing their thing. Once we were well into the new season and it became obvious that the creators had pulled the bait and switch on us, they then made Bo a larger focus of their marketing materials. But before the season started, they sold us on a story that we weren't going to see, because it didn't exist. And sure, you don't want to give away too much information about the season's story ahead of time, but fans absolutely have the right to know if the show they've been following since 2019 is going to suddenly sideline its main characters in favor of someone else. If the last trick was the most egregious, then this one was definitely the most shameless. They knew damn well that Mando and Grogu had almost nothing to do with the events of this season, and they chose to market it the way they did anyway. There are even some small things they did with the marketing that misled viewers. For example, Jon Favreau made a big stink about how Grogu had been training with Luke Skywalker for 2 years before returning to Din's side. The only real purpose this statement serves is to let viewers know that they can expect Grogu's mastery of the Force to be quite a bit further along than it was. Said differently, you could expect the little guy's use of the Force to be stronger, more consistent, and more focused. But in reality, we only got one scene in the finale where Grogu's use of the Force was on par with the expectations set by this statement. The rest of the time, Baby Yoda was using his trained and honed powers to spin around in an office chair and help Lizzo cheat on her diet. I'm just kidding. There is no diet. Just as with the trailer and the posters, the creators knew that Grogu didn't really showcase having taken a step forward in his mastery of the Force this season, but they went out and made statements like these anyway, building up hype for something they knew didn't exist. While you expect some level of BS from any marketing campaign, these examples go far above and beyond what is typical. Promotional material should give customers a taste of what to expect with a product, not sell them on something that doesn't exist. And the goal of this trick, similar to marketing campaigns in general, is to build up the hype for the show and get people to show up in big numbers for the season premiere and to hope for strong, sustained viewership numbers throughout the season. Well, did it work? We have to say they had mixed success with this one. The premiere actually saw an increase in viewers over the Season 2 premiere, despite heavy, incorrect reporting to the contrary that failed to properly calculate the different runtimes between the two premieres. So from that perspective, the marketing worked as they got roughly 26 million people to tune in for the premiere. However, The Mandalorian saw a pretty steady decline in viewers over the course of Season 3. So while the hype machine delivered a high turnout for the season premiere, many of the people who did tune into the show tuned out shortly thereafter, once they realized they'd been lied to. So there you have it, the 4 major tricks Disney and Lucasfilm tried to pull on viewers with the 3rd season of The Mandalorian. To recap, we began with going over the misleading story beats that Season 3 used to try and keep viewers tuning in week after week, looking for the payoff. And we determined that this trick was not successful as the season faced a steady decline of viewers. Next up, we discussed how the show tried to lean on having a strong finish in order to massage the season's ratings upward and get people to come back for Season 4. Of course, we'll have to wait for Season 4 to see if that part of it comes to fruition, but the creators actually achieved the first goal of this trick, leading fans to score the season higher than they had previously and leaving on a relative high note. Then we talked about the most insidious trick Season 3 of The Mandalorian tried to pull on us by handing Mando's own show to Bo Katan, in the hopes that people would accept her literally being handed the spotlight. And based on the very poor show ratings, we determined that this trick failed, as fans were not at all pleased with the story they were watching. Lastly, we went over the misleading marketing that promised fans a totally different product than what we got. This trick had some mixed success, as they achieved an increase in viewership for the premiere over last season, but the hype died out fast as the show steadily bled viewers as the story veered off in a direction that fans didn't expect and didn't want. Every negative aspect of Season 3 of The Mandalorian was made worse by the long wait fans had to endure between Seasons 2 and 3. Combine that with the awful writing and the obvious strife between the creators and the executives, as well as an evil Sith Lord destroying the franchise from the inside, and Season 3 was probably doomed from the start. In fact, it's more of a miracle that we got 2 good seasons of this show before it reached this level of shittiness. Plain and simple, this is not the way. The show shed viewers faster than Lizzo sheds candy wrappers. After her abomination of an episode, the show lost 13% of its viewers the next week, leaving the show down more than 29% from the same episode of Season 2. And on top of that, Disney Plus lost subscribers during a quarter it was expected to add a ton of viewers. There were other factors at play, but The Mandalorian is the most popular show on Disney Plus, so it's fair to say the poor showing of Season 3 played a role in that decline. And all of this decrease in viewership happened at a time when Disney Plus had 10 million more subscribers than they did during Season 2. In our view, the real negative effect of this season won't be felt until the viewership numbers for the premiere of Season 4 are in, but just based on public discourse alone, it's fair to say that Season 4 will see a big drop-off in viewers. And if they're going to take another 2 years to cobble together Season 4, then a 30 to 40% drop in viewers wouldn't surprise us in the least. Are there any other significant tricks that you think the 3rd season of The Mandalorian tried to pull on us? Will you be back for Season 4? Are you done with the show? Are you done with the franchise? Let us know in the comments below. Please remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel for future How They Tried to Trick Us videos, as well as comedy reviews of other current shows and movies. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.